You should be on page 9, which is Act 1, Scene 1. You're skipping through all the other stuff. That's just intro. Now, there will always be a guide to how to interpret some of the language on this side, and we'll be getting more comfortable with that as we go. For right now, I'll just be explaining things. But if ever you get really caught on a word and you can't use context clues, they have all of the really weird terms explained here on the right side. I'm sorry, on the left side. And so, for example, line 5 uses the word collar, and then we're told that's a hangman's noose. And, line 6, he says moved. We know that we're told that means provoked. So it's very helpful if you get lost when you're rereading this to use this to interpret it. But I'll be verbally doing that today. So think about 2 teenagers, probably between the ages of like 15 and 19-ish, right? And think about how there is no Snapchat, no internet, no TV, no music even, like recorded music. So there wasn't much to do. So people were pretty eager to fight and to like cause drama, because that was really a source of entertainment, right? You were either fighting or you were loving, right? And if you didn't have a lover, then you turned it into a fight, right? So these boys probably have too much time on their hands, and they're kind of hot-headed. They're looking for a fight. They're looking for anyone to piss them off so that they can get some of that aggression out. So they're walking down the street and they're best friends, so they're just giving each other crap. And these aren't major characters, but they kind of give us an insight into how most of the characters are. These are all teenage boys, remember, so not 30-year-old men, but teenagers who are hot-headed and maybe a bit hormonal too. So Samson says, Gregory, on my word, we'll not carry coals. And he's like, carry coals, you got to think of the literal, the metaphorical, carry coals. A coal would be a lump of coal. Well, it's kind of like carrying shit, talking mushrooms, right? It's we're not going to carry their stuff for them. We're not going to take their stuff. We're not going to carry coals. And then they go on a little wordplay of we'll not carry coals, no, for then we should be colliers. And we being collar will draw. And while you live, draw your neck out of the collar. I won't even go into explaining that joke because, while it would be funny 400 years ago, we don't really get the play on words now because those aren't really words that we use. But they're just kind of giving each other a hard time. Oh, well, if this happens, then you need to do this. And if that happens, you better do this. And if that happens, you better do that because you're about to die. Draw your neck out of the collar. So like I said, it kind of starts slow because some of the jokes don't really land, but I promise it gets a lot better. And so Samson on line 6 says, I strike quickly, being moved. He's if someone provokes me, I'm the first person to strike. I strike quickly, being moved. And Gregory says, but thou art not quickly moved to strike. So he could be saying that you're pretty slow. So when you do go to strike, you're very lazy. Or he could be saying that no one's around you, you're not being moved right now. But either way, he's just kind of giving him a hard time. He's hey, you're not, I know that you get provoked, but when you get provoked, you're kind of slow about it. Got to be on your game, man. And then Gregory said, and then Samson says, a dog of the house of Montague moves me. You know who really pisses me off? A dog of the house of Montague. That's who moves me. That's who provokes me. And Gregory says, kind of pretending to be a philosopher, well, to move is to stir, and to be valiant is to stand. Therefore, if thou art moved, thou runnest away. He's oh, yes, well, often when you are provoked, you will fight, and those who fight are brave. You, if you're provoked, you're going to run away. Thou runnest away. And again, they're just giving each other, just a hard time. Samson says, a dog of that house shall move me to stand. Oh, you think I'm slow? Well, when they come at me, I will be quick on my feet. I'm ready. Let's go. And he says, a dog of that house shall move me to stand. I will take the wall of any man or maid of Montague. So he's if I see a woman or a man that's a Montague, I'm going to take the wall. And what does take the wall mean? Well, back in that time, there were not garbage disposals. There was no trash service. If you have the baby's diaper contents and last night's stew, You want to get rid of it now? Toss it out the window. Splash. And so there were awnings covering the people walking on the street, but the awnings only went out, so much. This is, fabric's expensive. It's not like the giant awnings we have now. And so to take the wall would be to stay away from the falling old stew and baby diaper contents and all of the stuff that's thrown out the window. And so back then, you would be, if you're walking not against the wall, you could be splattered, right, by the stuff coming down. So if you were polite, you would let the lady take the wall so that, that's the polite thing to do so that she would be protected. He's saying, if I see any man or maid of Montague's, I'm going to take the wall. Basically, if I see them coming, like, oh, there they are. And push him out of the way so that he gets, dookie on him. And so he's just, again, it's funny how he's saying all this stuff. Is he actually going to do it? We don't know, right? A lot of it's kind of like locker room, blusterous talk. So he's like, a dog of the house shall move me to stand. I will take the wall of any man or maid of Montague's. And Gregory says, well, that shows thee a weak slave. For the weakest go to the wall. He's like, oh, you're going to take the wall? Pretty sure women do that. Did you just call yourself a woman? You're such a loser. And so he's like, if you're going to take the wall, that means you're the weaker of the two. And Samson says, you're right. 'Tis true. And therefore women, being the weaker vessels, are ever thrust to the wall. Therefore, I will push Montague's men from the wall, and I will thrust his maids to the wall. And Gregory's like, whoa. The quarrel is between our masters and us, their men. Like, hey, talking about thrusting those ladies up against the wall. Calm down. Leave the woman out of it. The quarrel is between us, our masters, and their men, right? It's a guy's quarrel. Don't try to bring the women into it. Samson's like, 'tis all one. I will show myself a tyrant. When I fought with the men, I will be civil with the maids. So, I'm going to fight the men. I'm going to be real nice to the women. And then he says, I will cut off their heads. And he's like, wait, what? You just said you're going to be civil to them, and now you're going to cut off their heads? And on top of page 11, he says, the heads of maids? And Samson says, aye, the heads of maids, or their maiden heads. And their maiden heads is what they would call their virginity, right? So he's like, yeah, I'm going to cut off their heads or take their virginity. Take it in what sense thou wilt. So he's like, you can take that however you want. And then him playing on that word take, he's like, they must take it in sense that feel it. And he said, me they shall feel. Well, I'm able to stand. And 'tis known, I'm a pretty piece of flesh. And he says, 'tis well, thou art not fish. If thou hast been a poor John. So he's kind of saying, I don't want to explain it too much because you guys can kind of get the double entendre. And if you can't, then maybe you're not quite ready for that yet. But, he's talking of doing one thing to the men, fighting with them, but then thrusting the women up against the wall, taking their virginities. And he says that you can take it either way. And then Gregory's like, yeah, well, they're going to take it. They're going to have to take it. And then he's like, well, me they shall feel. Well, I'm able to stand. And 'tis known, I'm pretty good looking. I'm a pretty piece of flesh, And you can take that as specifically as you want. And then Gregory, again, giving him like a hard time, is like, you're a pretty piece of flesh? Hun, if you were flesh, you would be a fish. And if you were a fish, you'd be a tiny little minnow. Yes.
Is he gonna assault them?
And that was my next joke, that was my next thing, is that he's joking about it, but would he actually do that? Certainly, hopefully not. That doesn't happen in the play. But especially now in modern times, we're like, are you talking about sexually assaulting the Montague maids? No, that's bad. We can't joke about that. But 400 years ago, even then, it would not be, of course, okay to joke about it. But to your best friend, you kind of like locker room talk, as they say. I know we can't fully get it. Women, we're a little different than that. We wouldn't.
Women were down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, and even today, some women objectify men. We're not going to be like, I'm going to take everything from them, but be like, oh yeah, he's so hot. Look at him, and kind of like that idea of like, you're like, oh yeah, I can't say anything that's too inappropriate. I would totally hang out with him. I would totally Netflix and chill with him. And it's like, well, no, obviously you wouldn't. He's a stranger walking by you, probably 10 years your senior. That's crazy. But when you're talking with your friends, girlfriend chatter, boys in the locker room, whatever. So it definitely is not literal, but it definitely would have been super funny back then, because all of this like double entendre of the sexual nature, like would the people in the stands would be laughing, because they'd be like, oh my god, he's saying he's gonna do that, and then he said he's a pretty piece of flesh, and then oh look, in his next line he sees some people coming, so he says, draw thy tool, here comes the house of Montague, and Samson says, my naked weapon is out, quarrel, I will back thee. But obviously he means his sword, like his unsheathed naked weapon, but being that they were just talking about something else, obviously Shakespeare knows that. And now he has his sword out, and he's ready. Quarrel, I will back thee. And Gregory's like, how are you gonna back me? Turn your back and run? Like, yeah, you're gonna back me. You're gonna back me by showing me your back as you walk away because you're a coward. And Samson's like, no, I'm ready, let's go. And he says, fear me not. And Gregory's like, no, Mary, I fear thee. And so now they have a plan. Samson says, I know what we should do. Let us take the law on our side. Let them begin. Let us take the law on our side. Let them begin. Let's let them start the fight. Because if we start the fight, we're going to get in trouble. And they told us that we shouldn't be fighting. All those mutinies had to stop. But if they start it, self-defense. I was defending myself, your honor. So that's his plan, is that let us take the law on our side. Let them begin. Gregory says, I will frown as I pass by and let them take it as they list. That's his plan. He's so cool, right? He's going to walk by. He's going to frown. Isn't he such a BA? Now, Gregory, that's his plan, is to frown. And he says, I will frown as I pass by and let them take it as they list. And Samson says, nay, as they dare, I will bite my thumb at them, which is a disgrace to them if they bear it. And he bites his thumb. And biting your thumb was literally bite your thumb, but it's kind of like giving someone like the middle finger, right? It's like an insult, right? Am I giving you guys the middle finger right now? No, because you're number one. You're all number one. But it's kind of like that equivalent, right? Like if you walked by and you like bit your thumb at someone back then, it would just be like flipping someone off. And then it's kind of like on them. Are you going to be man enough to take that? You're going to take that? You're going to let them bite their thumb at you? You're going to let them frown at you? I thought you were a man. Pfft, coward, right? So his hope is that he's going to be, getting their attention enough that they will be the ones to start the fight. And so that's their plan. I will frown as I pass by and let them take it as they list. Nay, as they dare, I will bite my thumb at them, which is a disgrace to them if they bear it. So they do it, and Abram stops him. He's of the other house of Montague, and he goes, do you bite your thumb at us? Do you bite your thumb, sir? And Samson's like, yes, sir, I do bite my thumb. And Abram says, do you bite your thumb at us, sir? Like, yeah, you're biting your thumb, but you doing it to me? It's kind of like when someone's like giving you the finger, right? And like, no, I'm just scratching my nose, right? And it's like, well, obviously you weren't. And so he says, do you bite your thumb at us, sir? I do bite my thumb, sir. Do you bite your thumb at us, sir? And they're being really polite with the sir. It's kind of like, hey, buddy. Hey, chief. Hey, pal. You got a problem? Hey, buddy. Hey, friend. You got an issue? No, pal? Okay. Right? It's like you're not actually being polite like, sir. It's kind of like, sir. And so they're trying to kind of pretend to be polite while they all know that they're not. They're being sarcastic. And so he says, do you bite your thumb at us, sir? And Samson, he whispers to Gregory. Aside always means whispers. Is the law on our side if I say I? Like, wait, if I say yes, I am biting my thumb at you, is it still self-defense if they start fighting? Is the law on our side if I say yes? And Gregory thinks for a second. No. That's it. Just no, right? Just not anything specific. Just no. It's not. You can't do that. Don't do that. And so Samson says, no, sir. I do not bite my thumb at you, sir. But I do bite my thumb, sir. And he does it again. And then Gregory sees this interaction and he comes up and he's like, do you quarrel, sir? And Abram says, quarrel, sir? No, sir. And Samson then, catches his breath and he's like, but if you do, sir, I am for you. I serve as good a man as you. And Abram goes, no better. And so there he's saying, you fight, you quarrel, you want to fight, you quarrel? And then Abram goes, no, I'm not trying to fight. And then Samson, because remember, he's kind of a buffoon, he's like, well, if you do want to fight, let's do it, because I'm just as good at fighting as you are. And Abram's like, that's your trash talk? No better? You're just as good at me as at fighting. Not better. Like that's your best smack talk, is that we're equally as good at something? Like, okay. So he's like, but if you do, sir, I am for you. I serve as good a man as you. No better? And then Samson's like, well, sir, he's not exactly sure where this is going. He's, again, not very smart. He knows that we're calling each other sir at the end of every sentence, though. So he's kind of, and Gregory whispers to Samson, say better. Here comes one of my master's kinsmen. So, he's just like, God, you can't even talk smack. Say you're better at fighting than him. My gosh. Oh, good. Here come some of our people. Oh, good. Oh, good. They're ready. They're going to come help support us, right? And so you see Benvolio coming. He's of the house of Montague. You see Tybalt coming. He's of the house of Capulet. And Gregory and Samson, they are of the house of Capulet as well. So they would be on Tybalt's side. You'll meet these characters later, but just kind of a good way to... When I was a kid, I was always like, are they the good guy or the bad guy? Is that the good guy or the bad guy? Right? That's how my daughter talks, kind of. Benvolio's the good guy. Tybalt's the bad guy. Okay? Just like, that's a simple way to think of it. Tybalt is like, he's like that super cocky, rich, spoiled, pretty boy who seems to have everyone wrapped around his finger, but is actually a jerk, right? I mean, I'm sure you haven't met that exact person, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Everyone thinks he's so great, but really he's a bully. He's a bully. That's what Tybalt is. He's a bully. He's a good-looking, rich, powerful bully, right? And remember, all these people are like roughly between the ages of 15 and 19. So we're not talking like prefrontal cortex full development here. Your prefrontal cortex is what makes us decide whether or not something is a good or a bad idea. And your prefrontal cortex is what causes you to think about the consequences, not only the short-term consequences, but also the long-term ones. And at this age, and at your age, and at their age, that's not fully developed. And so you might do something in the moment for instant gratification and not think about the consequence that will happen after a minute, after an hour, after a day, a week, a year. And that kind of long-term consequence is really important. And at this age, you're not thinking about that, not because you're stupid, not because you're immature, you're so immature, but because literally your guys' brains are not fully formed. They haven't fully grown until you are 24, which is why you can't rent a car until you're 24, because insurance companies have access to some of the best neural imaging and some of the best scientific studies that say that we aren't actually fully adults capable of making completely adult decisions until we are 24, because our prefrontal cortex is the last thing to develop. And they know that based on imaging on the brain. So while you can be a very smart 16-year-old, you can't possibly be fully developed in the brain. You could go to Harvard, have been admitted, taken the SAT at 14, but your prefrontal cortex is not going to finish growing until you are 24. And so that's why often teenagers make permanent decisions based on temporary problems, right? And that can be as serious as suicide, could be as casual as sneaking out or, something like that. But when we are not 24 yet, our brains are like crazy. And I remember I got married at 21, so I thought I was an adult. But now at 31, I go, oh my gosh, I was crazy. I was so rude and inconsiderate. I was selfish. I was cocky. I thought about instant gratification. I wasn't thinking about long term. And, now you look back on it and you cringe, but it's kind of freeing to know that it's not because you're a bad person. And when you guys lose your temper at your parents, or when you guys, do something really dumb or impulsive, it's not because you're bad kids. It's because your brain is literally trying to figure out how to tell right and wrong apart. And it sometimes messes up because it says instant gratification versus long-term gratification. There's a very early study that was done on kindergartners where they said, would you like a marshmallow now? Or at the end of class, would you like 3 marshmallows? And you could really tell like what level they were at in their assessment if they knew that 3 marshmallows later is better than 1 marshmallow now. And you guys, it's not marshmallows, it's like your time, right? Obviously, going to 1 period is fun because you get to go home and just like watch TV for the rest of it. But if you go to 4 periods at the end of the semester, you won't need to take the class again, right? Like piecing out in Zoom and putting on your headphones while I'm talking is fun in the moment, but ultimately you're gonna pay for it later on when you don't know what's going on, or worse, fail the class and like have to take summer school. So it's really, I think, cool to understand brain chemistry and know that it's kind of like almost a handicap, you know, and there are just some things that you can't fully understand until you're 24, which is crazy because like we can drink at 21 and smoke at 18, like it's kind of scary, all the stuff that we can do. But, you know, we have to there's also free will. So you can't just blame your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex and be like, well, Mom, I stole the car and then crashed it because Miss Tucker said my prefrontal cortex. So money, please. No, right? I mean, you can't blame it on that, but kind of understanding that like, sort of like checking yourself before you wreck yourself, understanding that like, maybe I should think twice about this because didn't Miss Tucker say that like I'm actually legally insane until I'm 24? Is this a good idea? I'm gonna give it 5 minutes and then I'll do it or not, right? So sometimes just stopping to think can help circumvent that impulsivity. So going back, you know, just remembering and why I said all that was that these I call them boys because obviously I'm older, but like I know they're not boys, they're young men. But you know, these teenagers, they are not bad people. They're just bored and hormonal and hot-headed, you know? And it's hot because it's Verona. So like what happens when men are bored, pent up aggression, you know, like, I mean, they're either gonna find a lover or find a fighter. I mean, you're either gonna go get with a woman or go kill her boyfriend. I mean, either way, you're gonna get your aggression out. So that's kind of where we are, right? Is like, they don't have much to do. They obviously don't have girlfriends. So this is kind of their only entertainment. Okay, so, you know, he just totally sucked at trash talking and he's like, well, sir, and then Gregory says, say better. Here comes one of my master's kinsmen. Samson's like, yes, better, sir. And Abram says, you lie. And Samson says, draw off, you be men. Gregory, remember thy swashing blow. And so then they all start fighting, and everyone's fighting, and then in comes Tibble, and he has his sword out. And Benvolio comes with his sword out, and he says, put up your swords, part fools, put up your swords. You know not what you do. So what's Benvolio coming? Is he trying to, yeah. Very good. So he's saying, please stop fighting. You don't know what you're doing. But Tibble, remember, Benvolio, good guy. Tibble, bad guy, right? Tibble comes in. He's like, oh, did someone say fight? I'm here. Bro, do you even lift? Let's do this. Like, I'm Tibble. Let's go. So when Tibble comes onto the scene, he's doing the opposite of what Benvolio's trying to do. Benvolio's trying to put up his sword to part them. He's putting up his sword to fight them. So Tibble looks at Benvolio with his sword out, and he says, what? Art thou drawn among these heartless hinds? Turn thee, Benvolio, look upon thy death. And Benvolio says, I do but keep the peace. Put up thy sword, or manage it to part these men with me. And Tibble laughs. What? Drawn and talk of peace? I hate the word, as I hate hell, Montague, and thee. Have at thee, coward. And he goes to fight him. And they start fighting, and then everyone starts flowing in from the town square. Enter 3 or 4 citizens with clubs or partisans, and they're screaming, clubs, bills, partisans, strike, beat them down with the Capulets, down with the Montagues. It's just like starting to be chaos, you know, the bells are ringing in the town square. Old Capulet, and Capulet is the head of the Capulet. So when we call him Capulet and Montague, that's Romeo's dad and Juliet's dad. And then Lady Capulet is the mom. So Capulet, he hears like the, you know, craziness happening in the town. Everyone's screaming and he knows exactly what's going on. He says, noise is this? Give me my long sword, ho. Did he just call his wife a hoe?
Yeah.
No. Ho means now back then. Do you remember like in Mary Poppins and they're on the little horse race and they're tally-ho, tally-ho, tally-ho. So ho means now, but it definitely is like, give me my long sword, ho. But he means like now. So quickly, give me my sword. And she's,
If you kill her parents, then
you know what? You can say it's Shakespeare. But maybe you shouldn't be like, Mom, give me my pancakes, ho. Because she might not like that, you know? You'd be like, Mom, it's Shakespeare for now. And she'll be like, go to your room, ho. Which is now. So, and I will be posting this video on YouTube. So you could just show them this video and be like, I swear, Miss Tucker said it. Picker, it didn't happen. So there now, you know, the chaos is happening. Capulet, what noise is this? Give me my long sword, ho. And she goes, a crutch, a crutch. Why you call for a sword? No, why do you need your sword? You don't need your sword. And Capulet says, my sword, I say. Old Montague has come and flourishes his blade in spite of me. And then you see Montague on the other side. Oh, thou villain, Capulet! Hold me not. Let me go. And Lady Montague is like, oh, thou shalt not stir one foot to seek a foe. So both Lady Montague and Lady Capulet, what are they trying to tell their husbands? Don't fight. No, don't stir a foot to seek a foe. Oh, you know, oh no, a crutch, why you call for a sword? And so both of them, the ladies, are like, please don't go out and fight again. Because you guys have to remember, back then, it wasn't like, oh, whatever, you got to cut. You know, maybe you get stitches if you need it. Put some Neosporin on it. Take some ibuprofen. Back then, in 1632, if you got a cut, there was a likelihood that you would die of sepsis within weeks. If you got a cut on your leg and then you went to do your farm work and a parasite or bacteria or something gets into the cut, there is no amoxicillin. Penicillin wasn't a thing, right? There was no Neosporin, there was no painkiller. Best you could do is pour some alcohol on it. Kill the germs that way, right? And they didn't even fully understand the concept of germs and stuff like that, which is why the Black Plague was actually happening at that time, which we'll talk about later. People were dying all over. So yeah, medicine was not a thing back then. They could put leeches on you. Leeches would let your blood, and they thought that would help you. So if you were sick, they would just take you to where there are leeches and put all these leeches all over your body, and then they would suck out your blood, and they believed that like the leeches would suck out the bad blood but leave the good blood. It didn't work, shockingly. So it's pretty serious, which is why Lady Montague and Lady Capulet are like, no, please don't go. Like, oh, like, here's your sword, but like, please, can we not do this again? Like, you were just fighting last week. So they're pretty over it. And you know who's really over it is the prince, because we talked about how Capulet and Montague, they're not royalty. Capulet and Montague, they're like Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. Like, they're really, really rich and powerful, but they're not part of the government. They're still, you know, their own entities. The prince is like the mayor. The prince is like a prince. How you think a prince, like a king, a prince. And so he is hearing all this chaos and the cacophony in the square, which means like a lot of loud noises. And he comes in on his horse and he's like pissed off because like, what is happening here? You know, it's like if you guys are having a giant fight and then Miss Harper comes. She's not happy, you know? Like, it's like they are all stopping and they look at him because ultimately he's in charge, right? You could say, you know, Bezos and Zuckerberg, they have a lot of power. The law is the law. You can put someone, now, in today's day and age with all the privilege, the law doesn't seem to be the law anymore, but Zuckerberg could probably buy his way out of a lot of this. But back then, you couldn't bribe the prince. You just faced your consequences. And so listen to what the prince has to say. And I want you to really think about the imagery that he's bringing up. He says, he's so pissed. He comes in and he sees all this. Rebellious subjects, enemies to peace, profaners of this neighbor-stained steel, will they not hear? What ho, you men, you beasts, that quench the fire of your precuneous rage with purple fountains issuing from your veins. On pain of torture from those bloody hands, throw your mistempered weapons to the ground, and hear the sentence of your moved prince. 3 civil brawls bred of an airy word by thee, old Capulet and Montague, have thrice disturbed the quiet of our streets and made Verona's ancient citizens, cast by their grave beseeming ornaments to wield old partisans in hands as old, cankered with peace to part your cankered hate. If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. For this time all the rest depart away. You, Capulet, shall go along with me, and Montague, come you this afternoon to know our further pleasure in this case to old Freetown, our common judgment place. Once more, on all pain of death, depart! So he's pissed off, right? So all but Montague, Lady Montague, and Benvolio exit, and Montague is like, oh man, that kind of sucked, right? Oh shoot, I think we're in trouble, like, ugh. And so he's pissed because he's this old guy now, you know, he's not a spring chicken like these other ones, you know, like I said, all the boys fighting are teenagers, but Montague, he's old, he's, you know, probably 60s, 70s, I don't know. So maybe younger, because back then old is different, but like now he'd be like 60, 70, like he's, you know, wise enough to know that this is not the smart thing to do. So he's pissed off. He asked Benvolio, who set this ancient quarrel new abroach? Speak, nephew, where were you by when it began? You know, what was happening? What's going on? Benvolio says, oh, okay, here's what happened. Here were the servants of your adversary, and yours, close fighting, ere I did approach. I drew to part them. In the instant came the fiery Tybalt with his sword prepared, which, as he breathed defiance in my ears, he swung about his head and cut the winds, who, nothing hurt withal, hissed him in scorn. So at first you're like, wait, what's going on? But you have to kind of picture Tybalt with his sword prepared. Okay, Tybalt has a sword. He breathed defiance into my ears. You have to literally think, like, what would that look like? Defiance, 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 right? You're like, you're talking smack to him, right? Oh, you loser. Oh, you're pathetic, right? Breathe defiance. Obviously, he's not like whispering. But again, Shakespeare, he's all about, you know, like metaphors, right? So he could have said like, oh, he said mean things to me, but that doesn't sound very fancy. So he breathed defiance to my ears. And he also, while he was breathing defiance, swung about his head and cut the winds, who nothing hurt withal, hissed him in scorn. Can you guys hear the swish of the... You hear the wind hissing in scorn? Because I'm cutting the wind. Is the wind hurt? No. So the wind is not hurt. It just hisses in scorn. Like, don't bother me. Right? So he's saying Tybalt was, you know, coming at me, you know, talking smack, waving his sword around. So he swung about his head and cut the winds, who, nothing hurt withal, hissed him in scorn. While we were interchanging thrusts and blows, came more and fought on part and part, till the prince came, who parted either part. And Lady Montague, she's like, oh, where's Romeo? Saw you him today? Right glad I am. He was not at this fray. And so she's like, wait, Romeo wasn't there, right? Oh, thank God. Have you seen him though? Like, oh, I'm so glad he wasn't there though. Oh, so stressful. So that's where we're gonna pause, because that's as far as we've gotten in the other classes. So that's line 120. And we are going to go back inside and briefly talk about how you'll be assessed for the future chapters that we read. So let's go inside.